Hello, YouTube. Happy Sunday to everyone. It is a new day, a new month, a new year, and a new decade. Happy 2020 to all of you. I hope your new year's been going well so far. Looking forward to a whole new year of vocal joy and glory. And you know the drill, for those of you who have been here before. This is our live chat. You can ask me anything you want to know, and I'll do my best to answer it. Anything about singing, about speech coaching, speech therapy, anything you want. I'm here to answer all of your questions. So, before we start, again, I'll just say that 2020 is going to be a great year for singing. I can feel it, and I'm excited for all of us to look back next decade when 2030 happens and be able to see all of the progress we've all made. Very, very exciting. And that begins right now in the chat, asking some questions. So feel free to ask everyone, and I'll be here to answer. In the past, we've asked so many things. We've talked everything from vocal registration to practicing to breathing, voice impressions, so many things. So feel free to ask away. Let's see. All right, Vampirost. Hi, Brendan. Hello, how are you? Thanks a lot for doing these component focus series. Awesome. You're welcome. They've been fun. You need them for your singing most of all. Yeah, I've heard a lot of people say that those component focus videos and even the voice breakdown videos, even though they're meant for voice impressions, they're helping people out with their singing as well. So that's great. Let's see. You just watched the video about the larynx, in which you said the larynx isn't a pitch changer. But in exercise 3, when you show us how to do the exercise with decompress, compress, I saw you raise your larynx. Sure. And okay, yes. So basically the question is, you saw my larynx move when I said it's not a pitch changer. You said you saw it move when I did decompressed, compressed, and vocal fry sounds. Yeah, so vocal technique is a process of isolating and separating different movements of body parts. What I mean by that is a lot of times, if you look at doing singing or voice impressions as baking a cake, sometimes if you want to have sugar and flour and egg, whatever goes into a cake, sometimes those ingredients are mixed into each other. And sometimes a little bit of your sugar is mixed in with your flour. And what I mean is when you try to move your larynx, something else happens. Or when you try to raise your pitch, the larynx moves, whatever it might be. Another way to think about it is if I try to move this finger tends to go with it. But it doesn't have to. We want to learn how to control that. And so what I was saying in those videos was that the larynx height is not in and of itself a pitch changer, right? That would be the cricothyroid muscles and the thyroarytenoid muscles to make the pitch go higher or lower, those two. But a lot of times we have certain body parts coupled with other body parts. And so it's not uncommon for that larynx to move, but we want to try to control that. So you might have seen my larynx move, one, just because I wasn't trying to keep it still in that moment. Maybe the voice that I was doing, it was more conducive to vocal fry. But the point I was trying to make was that we can control that, and that it's not the raising of the larynx that makes the pitch change, right? So we could separate those. I'd have to go back and look at the video, but you mentioned I was doing decompressed, compressed, and vocal fry sounds, none of which are pitch related, right? All three of those are not pitch things. So again, while it's very possible my larynx might move if I'm not focusing on that, I also don't think I was doing a pitch thing there. Also, not everyone's going to be a textbook, and you'll see once you get really high, it'll be pretty hard to keep that larynx lower. But that's the goal. The goal, and nobody's perfect, but the goal is to really separate out those components. So again, I'm not sure if those were pitch-related things I was working on, but the point remains, whether my larynx moves or not, we want to be able to control that. And so when you practice it, definitely try to pick a larynx height and keep that larynx height. Hopefully that clears that up a little bit. Happy to answer it more fully if I can help a little bit there. All right, LB, hello. Is your tongue position supposed to change as you raise in pitch and move up the registers? I seem to be able to do a perfect E vowel in my chest voice, but as I add more head, I seem to feel the need to change my tongue position and ends up sounding weird and unpleasant. Yeah, so this gets into similar to what I was just saying, actually, that sometimes certain body parts get linked in with other body parts. As you go higher, it can be very hard to sustain the same tongue placement. Vowels get really tricky as you get higher. If you notice when people sing higher, a lot of times vowels get a little bit distorted. The goal, though, is to make it as uniform as possible. The goal is to make your E still sound like an E when you're up top. There are a few little tricks you could do, though, to help the E. So if you're finding you can't keep the tongue position, obviously we want to do some tongue exercises. But sometimes, let's say you want to get an E, but you can't quite get it. It's getting a little I-like. Well, if you add a little bit of nasal resonance to that, I plus will turn it a little bit more nasal, a little bit more E-like, especially when it's in those really high notes. So sometimes you can use other resonance features, nasal resonance, even a little bit of a raised larynx at times to give brighter sounds that will sound a little bit more like an E. So you can use that if you really can't get the E. But the real idea would be whenever you're working on these sounds that you're noting if the vowel sound is changing, if the tongue position is changing. We want to keep it as uniform as possible. Again, nobody's a textbook, so it's going to be hard to do all throughout your range. But I would start back down a little bit lower in your range. And as you go up and up, take notice if you see that the tongue is moving earlier. You might be distorting the E before you even realize it, so that by the time you get to the high stuff, it's really distorted. So I would say even just a simple E or E, and make sure it stays E and not E, right? Make sure it stays on the same vowel. In general, think about your vowels a lot. You want to make sure that you have uniform vowels throughout your range. You're welcome, Vampiroost. Vincent the Prince. When is voice breakdown going to return from the hiatus it has been on? Ah, you've noticed. You've noticed. Sometimes we need a little bit of a break. It'll be coming back February 1st, I believe, is the next release date. And so we took January off, but we'll be coming back strong. And continue to give your suggestions, everyone, in the comments section. We do read those comments, and we want to give you guys the voices you want to hear. Happy to take some voice suggestions today, too, as I'm planning out 2020 and all the voices we will do. But yes, a few voices coming soon, and I'm excited to get back to it. I'm thinking, let's see, we're up to voice 31, I think, right now. And so by the time the year is done, that's going to be another 20-something voices. So we'll probably crack 50 this year. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. Okay. How is the right way to do a messa di voce, especially coming down a decrescendo? For those who don't know what messa di voce is, it's the ability to do these crescendos and decrescendos on one note. It's pretty tricky to do. And so as far as the right way, I think it's more so making sure we're not doing some of the wrong ways, right? And so a big thing to obviously listen to is pitch, and make sure that your pitch isn't going flat or sharp as you do it. So that's a big thing. I also would say be careful of changing lots of resonance features as you get bigger. Now, you might want to do that in certain circumstances, but if you're purely learning how to do the messa di voce by itself, careful not to go, right? You might want to open and close to get that, where really it's just giving more of that breath. It's giving more of that power, more of that energy. And for your question to decrescendo, same thing. It's giving less of that power, less of that energy, really getting in touch with that breath and that volume. And so I would say the right way is to make sure that you aren't putting other ingredients into the mix. Be careful that you're not opening or closing the embouchure so much. Be careful that there's not larynx shifts. Be careful that there's not palate shifts. Keeping everything consistent, but just using more of that breath. You might want to really get in touch with some breathing exercises. I would also say with breathing exercises, you might want to learn how to increase your exhale, right? Timing how long you can exhale for. I have found that when I try to do the messa di voce, when I first started doing it, I would run out of breath because I would give too much on those big ones. Then I had nothing to really control it with on the decrescendo, right? So I'd go from quiet to loud to quiet. I had given it all up here that I wasn't able to really have enough to even control it coming down here. Even though I was getting less air than I was already depleted in my tank, so I wasn't able to really control it. We all know that when our breath flow is not there, it's harder to control. So I would say a big thing is don't start by trying to go your loudest when you're doing it, right? Save that for later once you feel like you have that control down. Hopefully that helps a little bit. It's definitely one of those hard techniques. That is one you just spend a lot of time with to get the nuance of it. It's a challenging one for sure. Great questions, everyone. Kelsey, hi. Hi, Kelsey. I'm a beginning voice feminization teacher. I have a student who doesn't have any experience with pitch matching. Do you have any advice on teaching that? So far, I've tried singing a pitch in the middle of a range and moving up or down a fixed interval, starting with big intervals like semitones and gradually shrinking the intervals. Okay, so we're looking for pitch matching, correct? Not the other features, just really getting the pitch. I would say pitch matching is one of those things that does just come from experience, but also challenging exercises, right? But I don't know if I would start with so challenging exercises, meaning if they're having a really hard time pitch matching, then I would start on some really simple 1-3-5 kind of stuff. People tend to catch on to those major chords much easier. But if you're saying, well, they have that down, but it's the other pitch matching that's more difficult, then yes, I would give them some really challenging intervals so that their chords learn how to get to those notes quicker, right? So I would give weird, right? That was a minor chord, then I threw the sixth in there, right? So give them weird intervals is definitely a nice way to challenge their pitch matching ability. But if they're at the real beginning with that, then I would actually keep the intervals smaller and simpler versus wider ranging. Yeah. Now, if there's other aspects to the voice as well, and when you're discussing the feminization, there's other aspects, I think, to get that across. It's not just the pitch, but if the question was just for pitch, then yeah, you're on the right track, but maybe start those exercises a little bit simpler if they are a real beginner with that. Feel free to ask follow-ups if that's not quite making sense. LB, thank you. You're welcome. Do you recommend messing around with your tongue to search for the best sounding version of a vowel? I think it is really hard to learn how to properly position the tongue for the vowel because you can't physically see the tongue position. Okay. The tongue, let's talk about the tongue for a bit. I think first it's important to understand what the tongue can do. I think it's a little bit vague for most of us, a little bit nebulous, but it can do some really cool things. And I think that once you gain even a slight understanding of that, it helps to open all this up for you mentally. So the tongue, the front of the tongue, can move independent of the back of the tongue, right? We actually can hold the back of the tongue in one spot and do a bunch of things with the front. For example, if I hold out an NG sound, the back of the tongue is fixed. But I can move my front of tongue around and sound won't change. Right? That was front of tongue freedom, but back of tongue movement. I also can do the opposite. When I do vowels, I can keep the front of my tongue touching the back of my bottom front teeth like this, and the back can move. But I'm always touching there. So first, understanding that the front can move independently of the back, I think is very helpful. Then I would say start to do some vowel slides, sliding from one vowel to another, so that you understand where does the tongue position. Because you said it's hard to see. You can see it a little bit though. E, ah, right? We saw it drop high for the E. E, ah, E, ah, E, ah. Now those are the most extreme. E is the most high in front. Ah is the most down and back. But if you do that slide slowly, right, you'll start to get a better sense of where all these vowels are. So I would say learn these vowel slides to give you a good understanding of where the tongue is placed. Knowing that for vowels, the front of the tongue always stays there, and the back of the tongue moves up, down, forward, and back. So you can rewatch this video later unless you have a pen to write these down, but here are the vowels you need to know. Going from the highest and most forward down to the lowest, we have E, I, E, A, Ah. E, I, E, A, Ah. Listen closely during my slide and you'll hear them. Hear them in there? And then you can do them reversed. I, E, ah. Then our tongue can go back for oo, o, ah, ah. Oo, o, ah, ah. Ooh, and the tongue is still there. Lastly, we have a central vowel known as that's called the schwa. And there's also some things called diphthongs. These are two vowels smushed together. I, ow, oi, eggy, right? Those are two in one. You can rewatch the video here so you have all those vowels listed for you. But your job is to slide from E to ah, from oo to ah, from E to oo. Learn how to slide from all the different vowels, and you'll get a good sense of where that tongue placement should actually be. Then it's just taking that to singing. Your sung vowels should feel somewhat like your spoken vowels. And if you don't love them, change that tongue position a little bit. You might be a little lower in the back than you thought you should be. Maybe you need a little higher, right? And so once you learn those vowel positions, you'll be able to get a better sense of how to move them. And then once you have a better sense of how to move them, you can play around a little bit and see what vowel sounds you like best, keeping in mind that different registers and pitches and resonances are all going to play a factor in this as well. But I hope that's a start. Gia, sleep impact on the voice. How is your sleep routine like? Two different questions. Does sleep impact the voice? Yes. How is my sleep routine? I wish it was better some days. But of course, the more sleep we get, the better. You do want to get the standard 8 hours of sleep if that works for you. I have found probably more than anything that sleep affects my voice. Sleep and hydration. Not that they are the only important things, right? We need to learn vocal technique. We need to learn musicality. We need to learn to control every aspect of our voice. But none of those things can be accomplished well if we're not getting sleep and we're not hydrating. Those are what I call peripheral factors. Peripheral, they're on the outside, right? So they might not be singing itself, but they are roadblocks or roads or pathways to singing. Meaning, if you have the sleep and you have the hydration, you have a free and open pathway to learn more about the voice. But if you don't get that sleep and you don't get that hydration, there's a roadblock in your way, so you can't even get to singing town. You have to wait another day and get that sleep in. So please, everyone, get your sleep, get your hydration. And yes, standard 8 hours. Some of us can do better on little, but even if you think you can do better, get it anyway. Get that sleep. Kelsey, yep, just pitch. She doesn't have musical experience. Yeah, Kelsey, then I would say, again, if there's no musical experience, you were saying 7 semitones? Yeah, I mean, that's a fifth. We call that a fifth. And that's a good start. I might even start a little smaller, to be honest. You might want to see, again, everyone's a little bit different. Even just do a little bit of pitch testing. Say, what was a bigger gap? Or see if she can hear the differences between that. You want to do, in the speech therapy world, we call this scaffolding, which means you want to do something just outside of someone's comfort zone. You don't want to say, okay, you've never ran before. Tomorrow you're going to run the New York City Marathon. But you do want to say, you never ran before. Today you're going to run for 3 minutes. It's a little outside the comfort zone, but it's doable, right? And so I would say the intervals you give her, make them simpler for now. And the part of her range that you're using, make it a range that's easier to access. Don't make it the highest of the high or the lowest of the low, or don't make it the strongest of the strongest. Make it something that's pretty easy to get to at first. And then you could scaffold and scaffold and scaffold. There should always be a challenge every voice lesson. But if we start too difficult, that'll be the problem. You also, and this is often something that is not taught, but I would suggest it, you might want to get her to be familiar with what these intervals are, right? Believe it, meaning if you say, what interval is that? Was it a third? Was it a fifth? Teach her some of that musical experience. I have learned, this is one of my top tips I can give everyone. The more you learn about music, the more it helps every other area of your music. You might think you never need to learn how to play the bass if you're a singer, but learn a little bass. It's going to help. And having that musical knowledge, that's going to, she's going to file that in the back of the brain there. And the more she understands what these intervals are, a little bit of music theory, hearing the differences between the intervals, knowing which one's a bigger interval, a smaller interval, oh, that's a major, oh, that's a minor. All of these things are really going to help the brain even process pitch better. And then the vocal cords, that plus their own practice and experience there, will get them to match pitch much better. Fantastic questions, all really great. Mm-hmm. Curious about anybody's 2020 resolutions. Any singing or voice impression resolutions for everyone? Just going to check one thing, everyone. A message just popped up saying unable to connect to chat. So I'm going to give a test here. Test. Did it go through? Looks like it did. Okay. Technical difficulties, everyone. I might not be seeing your comments just because it says unable to connect. Let's see. Seeing if we can fix this problem, everyone. 1 second. I hate to bother everyone, but if someone can just give a test comment, even just write test really quick, just to make sure we're connecting here. I think we might be having a difficulty. If someone could just do a test really quick, that'd be great. Okay, I'm going to end the stream and then come right back on, everyone. Hang tight.